All right, what's going on, everybody? This is thank you for watching, listening, subscribing. This is episode 5 of the Blaklist podcast. Today's guest is a singer, songwriter, rapper, recovery advocate. Ladies and gentlemen, Benjamin Lerner. Thank you so
What's
much for
up,
being
man?
with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Grateful to be here.
Yeah, I definitely. It's man, like I kind of just I found you going through the wormhole. I start looking at one person and you just start going down the list, and it's really cool to be able to find other people out there.
Isn't it cool how there's a whole network of people online separate from any fellowship or any denomination of fellowship that are just open about recovery?
Yeah.
I
You like
never could have conceived this. And I got sober back in 2016, and there's some old heads with 50, 60 plus years. But even in that time, the advocacy game and how much it's changed at the point, us two separate recovery content creators vibing like this. This is cool, man. I really like
yeah,
it.
it is really cool. And it's I think it's great. So I think the world needs more things like this. And I don't care if people can say out there's a million recovery podcasts. Guess what? One more ain't gonna hurt.
It's going to help, man. I like to think
Exactly.
that exponential ripples, everybody talks about opioid epidemic, alcoholism, anything can spread like a disease. I think hope can too. And people might say that's corny, but for me, that's how I try to live my life. And I know you're the same. In a previous conversation, you were talking about, screw follower count, just making a difference. That's what it's all about, man. So
Exactly.
what's wrong with that?
Cool. All right, man. Well, yeah, man. So I guess, just kind of tell us a little bit about you and kind of where you started and where you're at, go from there.
I like to say I was an alcoholic and an addict before I took my first drink. And what that means is from a very early age, I was always looking for something external to fix internal problems. I'm a late stage millennial. I'm 31 years old, born in 91. So that was Pogs. It was Pokemon cards. It was video games. It was approval from other people. I was born and diagnosed with autism spectrum. Back then they called it Asperger's. Now they call it autism spectrum. But diagnoses aside, I just never felt comfortable looking people in the eye. I never felt comfortable in my skin. I would have sensory overload, hear, sight, any sense. I was the kid that, the stereotypical autism spectrum, monolith, hands over my ears in public. And I kind of, with the help of behavioral specialists, muted that out over the years. My parents told me that I had to be stoic, my dad specifically. And so I learned to kind of blend in. But there was always this sense of unease. And the first time I knew what alcohol did, and it wasn't just like an innocent sip of champagne where I tested the waters at a dinner party where I snuck it off the table. When I knew what alcohol did and I took that first drink when I was 13, 14 years old, it was a disgusting 6-pack of been out of the refrigerator Sam Adams that I pilfered from my friend's basement in 7th or 8th grade. But it made me feel like I didn't have to hide anymore. And it was a destructive shortcut that I chased for 10 more years, man. And it just took me to places I never imagined that it would. My parents put me in therapy partially because of that, partially because they got divorced. And it's crazy to say, some people think this is hyperbole, but 9 years old, the therapist told my parents I was experiencing suicidal ideation because I didn't have any friends at school. I was, I had friends that my parents kind of forced me with other parents to have play dates with, but I felt so isolated. It didn't matter if I was in a room full of hundreds of people, I felt alone. And that kind of fed into my budding alcoholism. Even when I started making friends, I started bridging some of the gaps. I started coming up with some of these kind of therapy-induced coping mechanisms to offset the feelings of being uncomfortable. When the alcohol came into the picture and, I don't want to say transcend, but kind of momentarily pretend that I didn't have the burden of baggage of, bondage of self. I could maybe convince myself for a second that I was okay with this destructive solution. I still felt alone. Even when I was drinking, even when I was smoking weed, it accelerated. Suburban, long-haired, kid, you already know the deal. Alcohol, weed, ecstasy, cocaine all through high school, skin of my teeth. I came from a family of privilege, man. I'm not going to say that we owned the shopping mall, but we sure as hell went shopping at it. I never wanted for anything. My parents got divorced, a little bit of family trauma there, but they provided for me. But I started getting in trouble early on, getting suspended from school. 19 years old, I got a DUI, dropped out of school, and all these consequences started coming in, but I still justified everything that happened to me and all the chances that I lost by the fact that if people only knew how much pain I was in without my destructive solution of choice, being the alcohol, being the weed, being the approval from other people, all this external stuff, they wouldn't just be okay with me using. they would bankroll, they would subsidize my using because I was so resentful and angry and destructive when I was sober, even more so than when I was using, because I was so empty inside. And that kind of delusional thinking snowballed and took me to places that I never could have thought possible. I started doing drugs that I never thought I would, and it just got really dark, man. By the time I was 20, stuff got really dark, but I still had a few more years to go before I was finally ready.
So what age? Okay, so what age were you when you took your first drink?
I was about, I want to say 13, seventh grade.
13. Okay.
Maybe 14. I don't remember the day or the grade, but I still remember what that basement smelled like and looked like. I will for the rest of my life. The taste of that horrible, vinegary, acidic, past its prime beer that unlocked this demon inside of me, man. I'm never going to forget that.
So what was going through your mind to even make, I mean, I know you had, a lot between, being diagnosed and different things. I mean, was it just a way for you to escape? That's why you decided you just wanted to just drink? Or was there just some other things that kind of started triggering it?
I guess I started believing that there were things outside of myself that could make it okay, that I didn't have any healthy self-esteem and I didn't love myself. Growing up in Washington, D.C., this is separate from any substance, but it does tie into delusional thinking. Like, I went to private school. I was a privileged kid growing up, but I started kind of understanding that, like, if I dressed a certain way and like I wore certain brands and my identity, my self-esteem wasn't good enough on its own. But if I put on a certain shirt with a certain logo, I went to like go shop at a certain store and came in with a bag and told people about it. I had a certain video game system. I had a certain type of TV. I went to a certain place on vacation with my family or lied and said I did, that would gain me this kind of superficial approval, which in itself was a drug. So I guess the best way I can put it is, when I drank, it calmed me down and it gave me this anxiety, this illusion that the anxiety was gone. It really came back 10 times stronger the next day. But for the minute, the instant gratification piece, I was okay. Just like when I put on a shirt and like had an identity. But what that rolled into is that when I went to the party, right, people, I thought they didn't like me. Maybe I just wasn't being my real self and that's why they didn't like me. They could see right through it. But they wouldn't let me into the party unless I came with a name brand alcohol bottle or a name brand weed strain in a bag. So my self-esteem's not there. My identity's not there, but I can put on the polo shirt. I can hold up the Patron bottle and I can be that guy. I don't love myself. I don't think anybody else loves me, but I'm numbing the pain with this drink and this drug, and I'm numbing the pain with this false identity and this shield to get me through the door and kind of make myself believe that everything's okay. And it was like a 1-2 punch with the chemical and the fake identity, and I kept that going for years until I couldn't anymore.
So it went from alcohol to, the typical, you go into weed and then it goes from there. Did your parents, did they ever know that catch you drinking or anything?
Oh my God, did they catch me? I was not sneaky, like at all. Like my parents caught me drinking dozens of times. My dad used to find stashes. My parents were divorced and, my mom was a little more well-to-do and she also suffers from the disease of alcoholism and addiction. And she got sober 5 years before I did, but I got sober in 2016 when I was 24, and she got sober when I was 19 in 2011. And so basically, like, our drinking progressed and got worse at the same time. And so she would enable me unintentionally. I would steal money out of her purse, and I'd buy these kind of aforementioned bags of weed and designer bottles of alcohol, and I'd stash them over at my dad's house because he was a little more permissive. But I would just go out there and they'd all be gone. And my dad would be like, I threw them out. And that happened again and again and again. But, my parents were distant. It wasn't a horrible divorce, but they weren't on good terms. So like, they just like, didn't really effectively communicate. Not that would have stopped it, because all I did was party. Like I went to school, I got decent grades. Everyone else, it was like a really high-powered performance school. Everybody else got great grades, but me, it felt like. But I graduated, but come Friday afternoon, sometimes come Thursday, it was weed, it was liquor, it was going to parties, and I didn't care about anything. My main discipline was classical piano. That's the one thing my parents cared about, but I stopped caring about that. All I wanted to do was get high, get drunk, and escape my inner tension. That's all I wanted to do. So no matter how many times they caught me, tried to ground me, I would sneak out the window. I'd jump out my window, and it's a miracle I survived, man. But like, they caught me too many times, and it did not stop me. It did not stop me from doing what I did.
Right. Like backtracking onto like with your mom, right? Like, isn't it amazing how because the same situation with my mom, you know, is that like your parents, you know, are so they're supposed to protect you, you know. I mean that's at least what you know the world's supposed to think. But then you know, like my mom gave me my first pill, you know, and that's just kind of how it was, and it got to a point where you know I was smoking weed with my mom, and like if I had you know, oxys, you know, she would ask for them and vice versa, you know, and you know, but and my mom's clean and sober now for many years, but it was one of those things where it's like, man, it's crazy how to think like our parents are like our biggest enablers, you know?
Yeah, man. My mom used to drink at the parties that I would have, and God bless her, she didn't let me throw parties at the house because she wanted to like be permissive or endanger me. She let me throw parties at the house because if I didn't, I would steal money out of her purse and go buy a hotel. She just knew that I wasn't going to stop, and she knew she wasn't going to stop drinking. And you know, I love my mom. I'm so grateful. She's one of the main reasons I'm alive and sober today. Huge inspiration in recovery, but we were both sick at the time. And we
Yeah.
didn't know no better. We were both using the same coping mechanisms because my mom started her alcoholic drinking late in life because of her own
Yeah.
problems. She's an outspoken recovery advocate and writer herself. I'm going to let her tell her story. I'm going to stick to mine and what impacted me. But, you know, the
Yeah.
least I could say is we were both sick, and I'm grateful that we're both alive and sober now because it got a lot realer than, you know, just DUIs, crashes, dropping out of school. That was the alcohol and the weed. But when it hit that next level, that's when it got really crazy, man. And just every single line I thought I wouldn't cross went out the window.
Right. Yeah. No, that's amazing that you know, that she was able to turn her life around just as well much as you were, you know?
Yeah.
So when did you finally decide that this is an issue now? Like, okay, like this, we got a problem.
Well, the time that other people decided it was an issue was a couple years before. I mean, I knew a lot of people say, "Oh, I had this moment I realized I was an alcoholic." I knew I was an alcoholic the second I started drinking. Like I knew, I thought being an alcoholic was the goal. I was never ashamed about being an alcoholic. I used to look at other people at parties who didn't drink alcoholically or use unsustainably, and I'd be like, why are you doing it? Like I'd see people at a restaurant drinking like a glass of wine and enjoying the taste. I'm like, you're missing the point. This is about oblivion. This is about self-medication. So I always knew I had a problem, but I thought my problem was my solution. And I thought everybody else was just getting in my way, making it impossible for me to numb my pain. But I really started getting interventions on my family aspect. Like after I started using opioids, I got all 4 of my wisdom teeth removed at once. Dentist told me I couldn't smoke weed. He gave me another destructive solution that came in a pill bottle, gave me a little too much of it. I don't blame him. I blame my own addictive nature. And there was an open air drug market after I crashed my car in a DUI in early 2012. My drug of choice went from alcohol to opioids real quick because I re-enrolled in school after I dropped out to avoid the consequences. Within 4 weeks of enrolling at school, I got my impacted wisdom teeth taken out. They gave me some Percocets. There was a 4-block away open air drug market in San Francisco where I was going to school called the Tenderloin. There are documentaries about it, man. It is not the right place to be if you are an opioid addict or a budding opioid addict. I'm going to give the short Spark Notes version. Within 4 years, I went from going to art school, actually chasing my passion, having fun in these glamorous underground parties in San Francisco with some of the same kids I used to go to private school in DC with, to strung out on the streets of the Tenderloin, living in a dirty 1-bedroom apartment, faking to my family I could go to school so I could get refunds from classes that they paid for me. I don't know why they were still believing in me, but I conned the system so I could get money for dope. $200 crack and heroin habit a day. Every line I swore I wouldn't cross, I crossed. IV, freebase, all that, man. Tracks on my arms, dirty tinfoil needles and spoons in my room. Nothing but hate, anger, and resentment in my heart. I have been to rehab several times, inpatient, outpatient, Suboxone, the whole 9 yards. But I still thought that everyone trying to get me clean were really trying to kill me because I thought if they knew the extent of the pain I was going through, that they would just get out of my way and either let me die or let me use. But it took me to the point I wanted to change. And I knew, even though I knew I wasn't at it the whole time, I wanted to do something about it. It wasn't when I was dope sick that happened millions, not millions, hundreds, if not thousands of times. It wasn't when I was pawning stuff, bad checks, every horrible thing you can imagine, Kurt Cobain cliche. It was when I had all the drugs and alcohol I wanted and then some, and I didn't get high. I got
Yeah.
physically high, but I didn't get spiritually or emotionally high. And that's when I knew my solution did not work anymore.
Right. So what was the light bulb when you finally you said it, but just when did you finally decide? All right, you know what? Was it a certain situation, or was it just enough was enough?
There's a friend I have, and I haven't spoken to him in a year or so, but last I heard, he's also clean and he's actually working in a treatment tech. It's a beautiful thing. But we used with each other for close to half a decade. We were using partners. I still had kind of these glamorous delusions that even though I had dropped out of college and was like a low bottom junkie, that I was still like a spoiled private school kid. So I would take like steal my family's money, cash bad checks, do whatever, go up to New York to use with this kid that I knew from before I dropped out of University of Miami, who's also a low bottom IV heroin addict at this time, because he started with the Roxy's down in Miami, not pain pills, but similar trajectories. And we're in this really seedy motel room in northern New Jersey. You know, the kind where like you flick on the light and like cockroaches go across the floor, like. Yeah. And anyway, we're there. We just bought a couple bundles of dope, 8 ball of coke. He's shooting his coke. I'm rocking mine into crack. I don't want to drug log too much, but again, every gritty, soft white underbelly addiction documentary thing, like it's that. And I got all the drugs I think I want. I load up. I put 3 bags of fent dope in a spoon, and I hit. I'm sick before I do it. It's not like I'm on Suboxone or anything that's blocking it, but I feel the physical rush. But I'm still there. The fog of anxiety has not been lifted. And I don't know if I had reached a physical peak. I don't know. But it wasn't the weakness of the dope, because I kept using for another couple of weeks. And this was in May, like around Memorial Day of 2016. And a couple of weeks earlier from that, I mentioned I had gone in and out of treatment centers, right? And there was this one treatment center, outpatient in D.C., Silver Spring, Maryland. And I had been going there in and out kind of to manage consequences, tell my family that I was going to treatment when I wasn't in school. And they were a Suboxone treatment program. And I have nothing but love for my brothers and sisters on MAT. I think MAT is recovery. It works for a lot of people. Did not work for me. I used it as a crutch to get through from binge to binge. And the treatment counselors who ran that program called me in and said, we're not just going to give you Suboxone for you to use anymore. Here's a 90-day script you can take to a doctor's office to continue. If you're here for Suboxone, we're going to give you that. You're not going to come in our treatment groups and mess other people's recovery up. We know you don't want to get clean. Here's your script. Get out of here unless you actually want to change. And so after that moment in that hotel room, I came back to DC and I called him because I knew that I had exhausted my right to chemical self-medication. It didn't work anymore, and I was scared, so scared. But I called him with the needle still in my arm, literally, and they directed me to an inpatient center. And the day before I went to that inpatient center, June 12th, 2016, my sobriety date is June 13th, 2016. I put 2 G's of fent dope, as much as I could literally fit in the water, with it like soluble, still going. And I thought, I made a deal with myself. I said, if this fucking G.5 and change, 2 G's of dirty ass fentanyl scrambled dope does not take me out, I'm going to give sobriety a shot. And I didn't even pass out, man. I woke up. I knew it was time for a starter life. So I got on that druggy buggy treatment van, whatever you want to call it. And I went to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the retreat, and it saved my life.
Wow. Yeah, that's shit. I mean, that's definitely a story, you know, because like you said, man, you didn't even pass out. You know how many people OD before they pull the needle out, you know?
Yeah, I just, you know, so many of my friends have died. I mean, I do believe in God. I think that, you know, God had no part in that, man. That was just my tolerance. And maybe it was a weak batch and, you know, the universe looked out for me, or God, whatever you want to call it. But like, I had no intentions of living to the age of 25 back then, man.
Right.
I thought life was a dead end. I thought there was no chance for me to get clean. But the same fear that took me to the block ended up taking me to the treatment center. Because once my solution didn't work anymore, I was just like going to another plug. I saw rehab and sobriety as the plug. I was like, what's the next thing? If IV dope's not going to cure my anxiety and insanity and self-hatred, what can? And I had been to countless recovery fellowship events before. I had been to countless treatment programs. But I actually wanted it this time. And so I chased it like I chased dope, man. And
Yeah.
that was the story of my life until now.
Yeah. I want to backtrack on a couple of things, but before that, I want, while we're on the topic, I've always thought, think about what you would do to the greatest lengths to when you were using, whether it was walking miles in the middle of the night with no shoes on or this or that. Why can't we do that in our recovery, And it's the way, and you just said it right there, you're like, so it's like, I always think that, man, it's like, man, we do everything we can to go get high. Well, why can't we do that in our recovery,
I think we can.
And we can.
The only difference is
but
that
why don't we?
when we're in recovery, we don't wake up dope sick. But so we have to remind, at least for me, I'm going to say me. I always get caught up in the we. I don't want to be no guru, no cult leader. I just want to speak for me. I need to remind myself constantly that even though I'm not as miserable as I was in active addiction, I still need my medicine, but it doesn't come in a bag anymore. It comes in working a solid program, whatever that means. I got my fellowship. I got my deal. I don't speak on it because that's part of the rules of it. But I have what works for me, and I respect all recovery. But if I do not do what works for me on a daily basis and remind myself every morning that just like I got to do some crunches if I want a six-pack, if I want to stay clean, I got to do what I got to do to keep that at the forefront of my mind, which is in itself an exercise. But I think the reason it's so hard for me is because I don't wake up dope sick. I don't need to go connect with my recovery fellowship to stay clean, but I do in order to stay in a place where I don't want to go back. And so switching that from the instant gratification, just chasing a high, trying to reach that level of not being dope sick piece, to wanting to keep moving forward and consciously chasing it instead of just chasing it to avoid consequences, to chase it to move towards a better part of life.
Right.
That's what's worked for me.
Yeah. I always say, at least again, for me personally is I have to treat my recovery like it's day one, even 4.5 years later, because again, we get complacent in our recovery, and we assume, okay, man, you got me on this we thing now. So, I assume, just because I have so many years under my belt that I don't need to do X, Y, and Z. No, I have to do it in order to keep on track. I have to do it every single day as if it's day one, because if not, you're just going to get comfortable, you get complacent. And then next thing you know, you just start going down, and sit there and wonder what the heck. So every day, you got to treat every day like it's day one.
I love that, man. That's a beautiful idea, because I think every day is day one. Like, I've been clean, knock on wood, go a couple more months, 7 years, 6 years and change. But I tell people, and some people think I'm just blowing smoke, trying to like humble brag by saying, oh, I only have today. But I really do. Because every day is another chance to relapse or a chance to stay going.
100%.
And some people say in the music industry, say you're only as good as your last single, only as good as your last video, only good as your last project. If you're a TV star, only good as your last season. Book writer, only good as your last book. Football quarterback, only good as your last game. I say you're only as good as your last day.
Yep.
In recovery. If I slip up emotionally in terms of emotional sobriety, spiritual, if I slip up, then I have the next day to get it right. I have today. But if I keep my scorecard and I look at my trophy shelf, oh, well, I got my life back in recovery. I got a job. I got a kid. I got a girl. I got a house. I got a whatever. So what am I doing today to that's great. Don't get me wrong. I'm so grateful for that. But if I let that, blur my vision to the point, nah, I have now. And if I don't remember that all I have is today, I'm going to lose it.
Yeah. So kind of hitting back real quick. So how did I know your mom, was drinking as well. How did your dad feel about you drinking?
He is the kind of archetypal hippie woodsman, 1960s Woodstock, intellectual. If you could picture the totem image of a little guy with a big discipline who literally built houses with his bare hands, wrote textbooks about environmental justice while juggling an axe and chopping trees with another. And part of that is my aggrandizing him, because I still have a part of me, and I'll be honest about it, that needs my dad's validation. But he's not I don't want to say one of us. He's not like me. Never has been. He's the type of dude, he had the opportunity to go to grad school after graduating from college and like doing all this fancy journalism stuff. I come from a family of writers and musicians. His dad was a journalist and writer. He is a journalist and writer too. But he had a lot of opportunities. He forsook all of those to hitchhike across the globe when he was 22 and go literally basically walk from Europe to Vietnam through Afghanistan. He got crazy stories he'd always tell me. But the craziest story he told me in terms of like him not being an addict is he was in the Golden Crescent in Vietnam, like where the heroin was made, like in the time of Frank Lucas, like right when the Vietnam War was going on, like in the early 1970s. And they had the opium and the smack, and they were doing it there. And he was smoking like pure opium in like Vietnamese opium dens. And on the third day, he woke up a tiny bit sick from it, and he took his bag of opium, he threw it over the balcony, and he walked out. And I don't know if that's an apocryphal tale, but the point is, regardless of whether he did that crazy thing or not, he just wanted to do his own version of DARE program for me when I was like a 10-year-old kid, and he told me that. He walked out of that opium den, and he didn't look back. He's the type of dude that can have like 2 glasses of wine. He doesn't smoke weed anymore, but he could puff a joint and then write a thesis for like, college or whatever. But he always told me that it was a willpower and a discipline problem. And I live in Vermont now. And when I was younger, he used to always take me up to Vermont. And like, I was a city boy and I was pretty spoiled, but he would have me lugging these sleds. He'd build a house up at the top of this old logging road. He couldn't drive up it in the winter. So he had me lugging these sleds, chopping wood, doing chores, like working with my hands, and I'm so grateful he did that because it got me out of my comfort zone. But that was his idea of discipline. And so when I got sober a year and a half clean, after I started working my program, getting a job, getting my life back, trusting my family back, he's getting on. He's 77 years old now. At the time, I think he was like 73. He told me, I was going to sell the house in Vermont when you were using, but now that you're clean, I'm going to give you the keys to it. And so that's why I live up here. Like a bunch of other things happened, but like he gave me the keys to that house, and that was a symbol of him regaining my trust. But we're up there. I'm working with him. He sees the glint back in my eyes, sees my arms are clean as scars. He knows I'm not using it anymore. And we're sitting at dinner, right? And he says to me, son, I'm so proud of you that you got your willpower and your discipline. You've worked harder than I've ever seen you work in your life cleaning up this house. I'm so proud of you. Swishing his wine around in his glass, right? And I just look at him and I say, Dad, I love you. And I'm so grateful to hear you say that. But willpower is what kept me sick, and surrender to the fact that I don't have the discipline to drink like you drink, and I never will, is what kept me alive. And I just let him chew on that. And there's a little bit of resentment there still, I'll be real, because for a long time, I loved the guy. He was never mean to me, but it was just clear I was disappointing him on every level. And just to be able to like reconnect with him now, he still doesn't understand. He still sends me like articles, and I love it because he's an intellectual. He's trying to learn, but like he doesn't get it. Like he'll send me certain things about certain things with the opioid epidemic, like, and he just doesn't understand it. But the point is that even though he doesn't understand it, he's seen that recovery is possible, and he's proud of me for it. And that's all I can ask for him, man, because a lot of people don't get that. He's open-minded enough to understand that I'm sober and support it. So grateful for that.
Awesome, man. No, that's awesome. So, we kind of touched back on the past now. So kind of changing gears up to the forward. So tell us about the music. When did that start after you got sober? Did it start beforehand?
Nah, did not start when I got sober. I've been playing piano since I was 9 years old. Like I say, I come from a family of writers and musicians. My great-grandfather was a fairly famous American composer. He wrote songs like God Bless America, White Christmas, things like that. But separate from any name drops, my grandmother was a pianist. His daughter, my mother, who's his granddaughter, singer. And I grew up playing piano, writing poetry. And when I was about 14, I put my love of music and words together and started making rap music. And, I dropped a couple mixtapes while my addiction was escalating. I think a lot of people make the mistake, and I actually made a reel about this recently that I think some people misinterpreted, because I made a reel about how there's a lot of rappers speaking mistruths about Percocets and oxys in their music. And a lot of people are saying, yeah, like down with rap music. No, like I don't blame rap music for the fact that I use drugs. Hip hop was the one thing that actually saved me from going off the cliff and dying, I think, because it gave me something to live for. It gave me something to do, to create. And like, I used to make music about drugs. I'm not going to lie. You know, the track I did with Mac Miller, rest in peace, before he blew up, I got the chance to work with him, was called Smoke Rings. The track I did with Project Pat from 3-6 Mafia before I got clean was called Walking Pharmacy. Like, I glorified drugs to the extreme. And I lost out on a lot of opportunities, ironically, because I couldn't keep the needle out of my arm. The cliques I used to record with when I was making weed and drug music said, and it's funny because they were all getting high too, but I was so out there that they were just like, nah, Skinny, you can't. That was my nickname, still is with them. You can't record. You can't come shoot dope in the bathroom. And Project Pat was like, you know, I don't want to speak on him, but he's like, dude, you need to get help. And this is the dude that made the song Sipping on Some Scissor. But when he saw my oxy problem at the time, he's like, Skinny, you're on them drugs. You need some help, man. Like, you should be chasing this rap music, not chasing those drugs. And so when I finally got clean, and a lot of people give me crap about this, they say, like, in the comments, and like, I know Lil Baby says, another rapper, he's like, I know they hating, but I don't read comments. I need to get better at that. But I'm a sensitive guy, man. I like to think all musicians are sensitive, and I try to just look for the positive comments to respond to those. But someone said, you're just glamorizing recovery through your music and chasing clout. And I want to make something clear. I don't know about the clout part, but you are damn right I'm doing everything that I can to glamorize and uplift recovery through music.
Yep.
And if I can do anything to glamorize, I'm not trying to make me the center. I don't speak for recovery. I speak for my recovery. And I speak for my recovery through music. And there are countless awesome hip-hop artists. Kalichi, Dax, Jelly Roll isn't sober, but he makes country rap about recovery. Every subgenre, every type. NLE Chop is a trap rapper. He's sober. Kendrick Lamar never had addiction, but he talks about sobriety. There's incredible recovery rap music out there. And right now, I'm trying to say the same way I chase recovery. We were talking about that with the same tenacity I used to chase dope. I'm trying to put my creative impulse towards creating recovery music with the equal amount of passion I used to put towards chasing clout, fame, and glorifying drugs. And that's what I'm trying to do, man. And ever since I got sober, I took a break from making music, the main thing, to get my life back, but I'm so grateful to be back doing it in the context of recovery because I love music. But if I only do it for clout, if I only do it for clicks, and if I only do it to get people to think I'm cool, I'm no better than I was back in the day when I was bringing that Patron bottle and that bag of weed to get into the party. I got to do it for me. I got to do it for my recovery, and I got to do it for the message that's underneath it.
Yeah. No, man, that's awesome. You know, I knew that you did music, but obviously this was some stuff that I learned, you know, but like I was 14 when I first started, you know, and, you know, again, you know, when you're younger and you get into it and you're just like glorifying everything else, you know, I mean, and it's just, yeah, man, like it's so sad to see the generation now, you know, how we lost Mac and Lil Peep, you know, and it's just, man, it's just, It is, you know, and Mac was a big influence on me when, you know, with me writing, you know, and I didn't get into, you know, to Lil Peep until after he passed away and stuff. But man, I start seeing that now and more, you know, and that's why I do recovery music as well, you know, because you know, you don't have to look at hip hop and just think that it's all about, you know, money, sex, and drugs, you know, like, so, you know, there's people out there that can actually just continue to grind and make a difference, you know? And,
absolutely.
You know, and for me,
the
like,
original roots of hip hop were literally hip hop. The literal definition is another word for conscious movement, both in the rhythm and the movement around it. So hip hop at its essence is made for betterment. So when people say recovery rap's not hip hop, yes, it is. Because if you listen to the Sugar Hill Gangs, the Cool Mo D's, the Das FX's, the EPMD's, even the ones who talked about smoking weed, the Nas's, the Big L's. Big L made Street Struck, man. Big L made Street Struck. And the gangster rappers, all of them talked about reality. And right now, the opioid epidemic is reality and recovery is reality too. So that's awesome that you're making uplifting music, man. That's what it's all about. Doing this
Yeah.
podcast to share stories of recovery, doing your
Yeah.
music to speak on recovery. That's what's up, man. I would
Yeah.
love to play some of your stuff on my show. Just let me know. I would love to play it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a very picky person, man. So it takes me, I'll rewrite and re-record a song 3 or 4 times. Yeah, you
I'm
trust
the
me,
same
man.
way,
But
man.
it's just, but when you're putting something out that you're passionate about, you want to make sure it's on point. You want to make sure that it's the best, the best version that it can be. At least for me, and I'm very, I'm very picky. So I fine tune everything that I do.
Yeah, man. I've been trying to do something. I put on my first recovery album in 2020, and I was still, figuring my sound out and everything back then in a new context, like playing piano and rapping over it at the
Yeah.
same time. And that's what I'm doing for the reels now, too, as I'm working on my next album, which is going to have more production stuff. I don't know if I'm going to go full beat yet. I'm still working on, but it's not just going to be piano. But the reason I put out a music, like a 16-bar music reel every week, is because I'm such a perfectionist, and it just allows me to get out of my comfort zone, and it's all one take. I can't like do the vocals separately. I can't punch. I can't. It's all me playing piano at the same time. So at the end of the day, if I don't get a take I like, I still post the best one, because it's like, this is me. This is who I am. This is what I got. I'm not putting fancy effects on it. Like, that's my way of staying on the grind. And even though I'm working on a bigger project, just being like, this is who I am. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that impulse to like make that music perfect for me, like when I'm dropping like a real track, it'll like the longest time, man. I'm such a perfectionist with it. So I vibe with that completely.
Right. Yeah. No. When I listened to your album Clean, I loved just the way that even just the minimal piano and the rapping. I think it was awesome.
Thank you,
So
man. Well, I mean, it's what that album really signified was the two seemingly divergent sides of my personality and my musical personality coming together. I mean, a lot of people look at me and, it's like classical piano player who writes puff journalism pieces for Vermont tourist magazines. And then you got like recovering heroin addict rapper. Like, how does that, mesh together? But my whole thing is people are multifaceted, man. And people in recovery get to embrace everything. I used to hate the fact that like part of my story was this and part of my story was that. I thought it all had to be perfectly balanced, like a plot of a movie or something, that where every angle was perfect and everything made sense. But life doesn't make sense, man, and that's okay. I don't need to control the narrative. Look, I'll be the first to say this. I use filters on my reels because I like the way it looks. I might throw an auto tune on a singing track when I go in the studio just because I like the way it sounds. But when I do my lives and when I post photos of myself on my Facebook, I don't use any filters. And the reason is that I want people sometimes to see that and with the reels, I just posted my music like all the way through, no editing, just because I want people to see that, yeah, I might it's the same thing. Like I might put on a suit and go to an event at my job. But if someone asks me if I went to college, I'm going to tell them, no, I didn't. And if someone's going to say, hey, you want a glass of wine? I'm going to be like, no, I'm in recovery. Because even when you get to a place that whether you're working in the trades or you're working in medicine or law or whatever, if I allow myself to forget where I came from, nah, man.
yeah.
And that's why I had to keep it so threadbare with the music and clean and just put those two sides together in that way, because if I forget where I came from, I'm going to go back.
Yeah. So besides music, what are some other tools that you use daily to help with your sobriety and help maintain it?
Well, I like to sum it up with 3 phrases that regardless of what fellowship program one is in can easily apply, I think. Again, I like to speak for me, so I'll do that. And that's keep moving forward, run towards the truth, and don't quit before the miracle happens. And to me, that means persistence, honesty, faith. And faith can mean anything. It can mean God. It can mean good orderly direction, gift of desperation. I heard a lot of those acronyms in the rooms of several recovery fellowships. But to me, it just means that, if I have that tenacity we talked about, then I'm going to do the things that would constitute any old school or new school recovery program. I'm going to reach out to people because I value my recovery and I value the transparency that's kept me alive so far. I'm going to be transparent with the people at work. I'm going to be transparent with my loved ones. I'm going to apply the principles of recovery that I've learned on a daily basis, not because it's the right thing to do, not because I deserve a medal or whatever, but because it makes my life easier. And that was the biggest revelation I had in treatment, man. I'm going to be honest. I wanted to leave. I didn't want to stay. And it wasn't because I wanted to use, although there's probably part of it. It's because I got involved in a rehab romance stupidly there. Someone started a rumor about me that made this girl not want to talk to me anymore. And I just wanted to leave and get away from my emotional BS and drama. But I was sitting in this office and I saw this mirror and I just looked at myself. And I didn't like what I saw because I was lying to myself. I was lying to people around me. And I finally saw that I was putting more effort into lying to myself than I would ever have to put in if I was honest. And so when I work my program of recovery, it's not because I deserve a halo or I deserve like employee of the year. It's because it's easier for me to be in recovery. But that's not how I naturally am programmed. I am programmed to make my life harder. I am programmed to work as hard as I can to make my life easy as possible and delude myself into thinking that it is easier when I use chemicals and use deceit and manipulation and all these things that I have to work so hard to do. So what I do on a daily basis is I find ways within my recovery fellowship and the structured principles and, the things that we do in that fellowship. I'm not going to get into it too much, but the things we do on a daily basis to take inventory, clean house, help others, and maintain connections with others, I do that. And I reach out to people when I can. I'm horrible at picking up the phone. The internet's been a huge resource for that. People I've met through the non-denominational recovery fellowship. I call it the online recovery community, like right here, man, doing this, speaking out, trying to help people, doing what I did in that thing we cut at the door earlier on in the interview when we got interrupted, someone asking where a fellowship event was. Like, I recover out loud, and I'm not ashamed of that. Some people got a problem with that. I don't, man. That's how I have to integrate at every level. I have to live it. And whether that's, I don't broadcast it. Like, I don't go into a coffee shop and say, hey, can I have a chai latte? By the way, I'm in recovery from heroin addiction. But if people ask me, I'm an open book, not because I want to showcase it, but because I don't want to lie anymore. So that honesty, that persistence, and that faith that things will get better, even if the instant gratification moment isn't great, even if I don't feel great today sober, tomorrow can get better. This too shall pass. And if I apply that persistence, honesty, and faith, it's possible to have a better day. That's what works for me.
There you go, man. So what's the future looking like for you?
Well, I like to take things one day at a time, but I'm grateful to be a dad. I'm grateful to be sober. I'm grateful to work with people who let me value my recovery. And even though not all of them are in recovery, they understand what I'm doing. And my day-to-day life these days, man, consists of writing articles for the publications that I write for: Vermont Magazine, Stratton Magazine, Manchester Life, Berkshire Magazine. They're regional magazines here in Southern Vermont and Berkshire County, Massachusetts. And I've actually gotten to write some articles about recovery nonprofits through them. Some great recovery nonprofits in Vermont: Jenna's Promise, Working Fields, Turning Point, and give back to the community that way. And, the person who owns the studio where I recorded my album at, who's my manager, is actually the owner of the magazines. And I got that opportunity just from showing up to the studio. I started writing the clean column because I showed up to the studio. And he said, hey, can you write too? Yeah. Wrote the column, showed him a couple drafts of that. Same time I was doing that, he's like, hey, do you want to write for these magazines? I was like, I don't have a college degree, but I kept going. I kept showing up, and I got to where I'm at today. And my goal is to keep doing that, man. I'm working on my second album. I'm putting out a weekly recovery verse, a weekly recovery column. And I forgot to mention, my work at the magazines and the clean column and the reception from the local community here in Vermont led to my radio show, Clean Jams, where I combine recovery advocacy with recovery rap music, play recovery rap music, bring people on to talk about recovery. I'd love to have you on and return the favor for the awesome service you're doing to the recovery community. And the most recent development, man, and what spurred this conversation is that, I made my first reel less than 6 months ago, man. And what's crazy is the reels in terms of, and screw follower count. It's about helping people, but I didn't think I was a content creator, but
Right.
if you put one foot forward in front of the other, and like I talked to Quinn Stone, I had him on my show. I watched recovery creators, Rachel Elizabeth XO, Dear Recovery, so many awesome content creators out there who are in different paths. JD Delay is another one, Jimmy McGill, like so many incredible people in recovery advocating for it on social media. And I just thought, maybe there's a way I can do this. So
Right.
ever since, I did my first reel in November, got the permission from my team to start doing it on my own, started the TikTok, started the Facebook, and I'm uploading 2 reels and 1 post a day on Instagram and Facebook and 1 to 2 reels per day on TikTok. And I guess regardless of the platform, the follower count, or be it radio, press, music, content, I'm just trying to talk about recovery, man. I'm just trying to put the message out there that recovery is possible, that regardless of how you choose to recover, you're doing great. And that if nobody's told you today, you deserve to be alive, you deserve to be sober, you deserve to be happy and fulfilled and safe and at peace. Because a lot of people, when I was still in active addiction, even people in the treatment community, God bless them, had a message of, you're only good if you do it this way. You're only good if you do it that way. For me, it's like, you're good if you survive today. And I just want to help people survive the next day. And that's why I applaud you for what you're doing, man. Because this type of podcast, this type of conversation, where you invite people on to share their experience, strength, and hope, and give them a platform to talk about what they're doing, that's priceless, man. That's what recovery advocacy is all about. So as some of my friends back from DC used to say when I pulled up at the party before I got sober with all the bottles, I'm trying to be you when I grow up, man. I'm trying to be you. That's what I'm trying to do. Just keep the recovery advocacy pushing, man. One day and one song at a time.
Yeah. So can people find Clean Recovery like online, or can they listen to it outside of Vermont?
Yeah, man. Clean Jams is I got a Mixcloud page, which is accessible through cleanjams.com. Let's see. The Clean album is on Spotify. I believe it's also on Tidal and Apple. It's Benjamin Lerner Clean. I have pages on Facebook and Instagram. Benjamin Lerner on Facebook, just like my name. Benjamin.Lerner Instagram. Benjamin Lerner Recovery. No dash, no underscore on TikTok. That's for the content. And Clean Jams is also live streaming on weqx.com every Thursday night. Wherever you are, you can listen to it. And that's the radio station that broadcasts it. And just want to shout them out because, again, not people in recovery, but they support messages of recovery in the community. And I'm so grateful for everyone who's ever given me a chance to speak out about recovery publicly, man, because it is such a different world than when I first got sober. This was not happening. And I am so grateful that it is happening now, because there's many people who aren't in the rooms of any fellowship who need to hear just another alcoholic or addict in recovery saying it's possible. And I wish I had that early on outside of the rooms, man. Someone saying that it's okay and tomorrow would be better. So grateful for everyone, including you, for giving platforms for recovery to grow.
Most definitely. Yeah. No, and what I'll do is I'll end up when this goes live, we'll link all the links in the description. That way everyone can have access to it. But yeah, I found some amazing people. Like I said, I got people lined up, Dear Recovery, to come on, and Danny Shannon, and I'm waiting on a response back from Quinn and Rachel Elizabeth. So hopefully I get with them soon. But yeah, man, it's amazing. It's just there's that many people out there that are doing this, and again, there can't be too many of us out there. There's people out there that are just doing it,
Yeah. I mean, when people heard that I was a recovery rapper, they're like, oh, there's already a couple recovery rappers. I'm like, how many weed rappers are there? How many drug rappers are there? Nothing against weed rappers or drug rappers. I got big love for the plant recovery community. I want to make that clear. I'm not stigmatizing cannabis. Don't throw me under that thing. I love people who are in recovery with cannabis, but I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of all kinds of rappers, gangster rappers, club rappers, clothes rappers, car rappers. Like, I'm a recovery rapper. You're a recovery rapper too, and musician and podcast host. Like, the more, the better. Right. Everybody should make recovery content. I swear. I would love it if everyone in recovery did something like this, man. It would be so cool.
Right. So last question I'm gonna ask before we wrap it up. So what would your one piece of advice be to somebody who is they were at your like you were on your on they're just ready to just enough is enough, man. Something's gotta give. And they're just kind of hanging on by a thread. What's your advice?
Well, the advice is kind of in the description that you just gave. And when
But
someone says enough is enough, that can be misinterpreted, at least for me. Because for me, when I hear enough is enough, that can also be a parent telling a kid to clean their room. Enough is enough, young man, young lady. You pick these toys up, and it kind of translates to addiction. Like,
yeah,
like you made this mess. When I say enough is enough, that's not what I mean. I mean, accountability is important. People got to, make amends, do whatever they got to do. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is people used to say, you don't have to drink anymore or use anymore if you don't want to. Old heads, like when I went to the sobriety fellowship events before I was ready, and I used to say, screw you, man. Why are you saying that? Like, are you saying I'm a bad person if I do? Are you saying I don't have discipline? No, that's not what they were saying. What they were saying is, I do not need to keep intentionally perpetuating this cycle of misery. I don't need to do it. It is possible, and not only possible, but even though being dope sick and getting the shakes from alcohol or whatever drug withdrawal is horrible, there's a reason people don't get off. It's tough. But continuing in that pattern is more horrible. There's more pain. There's more Sisyphean climbing up the mountain with the boulder only just to have it roll back. And I am so grateful that I realized the thing that saved my life, which I'll repeat it from earlier, it was going to be so much more work and pain to keep lying to myself with chemicals and literal lies and keep using than it is to just let it go, surrender, endure the pain at the beginning, keep moving forward, run towards the truth, and not quit until the miracle happens. And that miracle is, if you can't believe in God, if you can't believe in a power greater than yourself, whatever that means, I could believe that if I made it through withdrawal and I was not dope sick anymore and didn't have to pay $300 not to throw up in the morning or have the shakes, that life would get better. And it did. This too shall pass. Keep going. You're worth it. You're a good person, and you deserve to be happy.
I like that, man. I like that. I like what I hear. All right, man. Well, thank you again, man, for coming on. Thank you for taking time out of your night to sit down and talk with us. And yeah, man, we'll do some collaborations here in the future and kind of go from there. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too, man. I'm such a fan of what you're doing here. It's an awesome format, awesome questions, and I'm so grateful for your recovery advocacy work, man. One day at a time, we got this.
Yep, and same goes for you, man. Just keep fighting the good fight, every single day. But all right, everybody, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you for tuning in with us today. Remember, we recover out loud for those suffering in silence. Keep coming back. Until next time, peace.
Peace.